The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at BILLWARDLIFE and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Creator, thank you. Thank you for my life today. Please allow me to keep in perspective what's actually important. Please allow me to be out of my own way and remember that the most important thing about what we're doing here is the message, and it's not the technology or the recording, although it is important because that'll transcend and bring more hope to people longer. Just give me the strength and calmness to just settle in and sit and be present right now, right here. I ask, Creator, that you just give me the grace that you provide me. And I just want to thank you, Creator, for allowing our friends to be present on the Zoom and in person. And I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of their journey and them be a part of mine. Creator, I'm just so grateful for my life today and to be able to do this. And thank you. Hi.
God, thank you for the opportunity to get together tonight and to learn together and to connect on our busy schedules and to come together. And if you can't get here, to be online and to join us in that way. Be with those who are grieving right now. There seems to be a lot of people that are really going through some significant loss, and so give special strength to the people who are supporting each other through that, and that we're able to be sober and we're able to support people in ways that we weren't able to when we were in addiction. And thank you for our families as we come together over the holidays, and for our families that may not be our blood families, but that, you know, when we're in recovery, we're not alone and we don't have to be alone. There's always somewhere that we can go, and thank you for, you know, letting me find the solution, because a lot of people don't find the solution. And I feel really grateful and really lucky. And some days I feel a sense of a survivor's guilt of some sort, because I don't understand why some get it and some don't. And so help me to never lose the feeling of the gratefulness that I have the solution and that I can spread the message and not to take that for granted. Amen.
Okay. We're going to get right into it. So doctor's opinion, we're just going to quickly blast off the rest of this doctor's opinion. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, "Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me." Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it is often not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. So I just want to touch on that. So one feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. So early in the doctor's opinion, on page XXVII, when the doctors realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was urgent importance, but they couldn't figure out how to do the mental rearrangement, right? And it said we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside of their synthetic knowledge. So they knew something needed to be done, but they didn't have the way to get this done. So basically what he's saying here is the same thing. One feels that something more than human power. The doctor's seen Bill W. doing this, and he sees that something more is required to produce the essential psychic change. And when you really understand step 6 is really where it describes the psychic change, right? It talks about any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults has indeed come a long way spiritually. So if I'm willing to try repeatedly on all my faults without reservation, and I bring God into all these character flaws, my distorted thinking, my judgments, my resentments, all these kind of things, then God gives me the power to change my perspective on these things, and I rewire myself, right? And that's what he's kind of alluding to. And that's kind of what that step 3 prayer is talking about. That's what the step 6 is talking about. That's what step 10 is talking about. And then what I also love here, although he gives all that is in him, these doctors give everything to us, right? But it's often not enough. It's often not enough. Earlier in that chapter, it talked about we have found nothing that has contributed more to the rehabilitation to these men than this altruistic movement now growing up among them. Like the God and the processes through this program are what rewire our brain, is what actually heals us. It's really a program of healing. It's not just a program of not drinking. Through everything that we do, through you bringing God in, and God is love. Love is what heals everything, right? It takes time, but that's what we're talking about. And then another really important thing that people miss is on this paragraph a little further down. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable. What that means is the aggregate means combined. So they're taking all of these psychological, psychiatry, counselor, mental type of things that doctors use of recoveries is considerable. So you bring all that together, it's considerable. They got a lot of information out of mental health experts studying us, right? But we physicians must admit that we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. We alcoholic types do not usually respond to that type of approach. And I could, I bet there's a lot of people in here that have went to the psychiatrist, psychologist, the doctors, and tried every imaginable remedy. But when you came here and you started using God, you started getting like real results. And it kind of boils down to this. You can't change your sick mind with your sick mind, right? The doctors are the power that you're relying on. And then you're left to your own. But now when you come here to these fellowship programs, you have another power that you might not trust yet, but that's the power, man. That power actually has the power to change me on the inside. And through using it and starting it at a beginning point, you build some faith, right? To the point where you're into trust. Janine, do you want to speak on any of that since you're a mental health expert?
I would like to get through the doctor's opinion, but I'll save my points till the end. You keep going.
Okay. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months or some problem business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink or they took the drink a day or so prior to the date, and the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a physical craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the same supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. So just quickly on that, once you take the first drink, okay, you're no longer drinking to escape life like you might have when you put it in your body. You are now drinking to overcome that physical craving that now takes over beyond your mental control, which is why you can't put it down. Which is why when you fall asleep and you wake up the next day, you're picking it up against your will, whether it's drugs or alcohol, because now the allergy is set off and it's done with you when it's done with you. You don't have a power of choice in this deal, okay? And I love this. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue the fight. The supreme sacrifice is death. It's suicide. And there's so many people that kill themselves with this illness because they don't know what's wrong with them. They can't not drink or use drugs, but they can't not do it either, right? They're screwed if they do, and they're screwed if they don't. And they don't know what's wrong with them. And a lot of these people, like, you know, I hear it all the time. I made bad choices. I make bad choices. Oh, I slipped the other day and I made a bad choice. And you keep telling yourself you're making the choice. You create so much shame and guilt within you because you're affecting other people and yourself. You don't have the power of fucking choice. We got to make sure people understand that you are not making the fucking choice. If you live in the restless, irritable discontentment, that makes the choice for you against your will. And you pick it up because as we succumb to the desire again, we fail to resist. We don't have the power of choice, but the mind looks like it does. It thinks it does. But when you've crossed the line as an alcoholic addict, you do not have that power of choice. And then you put it in your body and all bets are off. That's why so many people kill themselves. And a lot of people in the program end up killing themselves and drinking again because they don't understand the full implication of the spiritual malady part of the disease. Because all the rooms we go to just say, just don't drink, just don't drink. Oh, you got 1 year, we pat them on the ass and say, good job, you're on your way, keep going. And I always say, yeah, they're on their way. They're on their way to a relapse. And most people don't make it 2 years. And if they do make it 2 years, a lot of them are pretty crazy, man. And then they're seeking schooling and jobs and relationships and just trying to grasp at things to make themselves happy. But you got to get good on the inside. Once you get good on the inside by discovering what this malady is, then you can work on that solution, and then you can get good on the outside, right?
I guess I will add that the powerlessness that's always mentioned, I think that I mostly hear people talking about it in a way that once a person starts drinking, they're powerless, and then they keep drinking because of the phenomenon of the craving. But really the powerlessness isn't it's not when you're drinking either. It's when you're sober. You're saying, I'm powerless against alcohol. When I'm sober, I will continue to drink. I will continue to drink every single time because I'm powerless. I have no defense against the first drink, the book says. Like it's not talking about I'm powerless once I start drinking. It's I'm powerless against the first drink. And the defense has to come from a higher power. So there's no human power. It's not found in the doctors or the relationships. All that shit, I feel like it's prolonged. For me, when I think of my own, journey with this shit, I think the education and the relationships and the attainment of, material stuff prolonged the inevitable. And I think that I caused myself a lot of misery. And at some point I crossed a line that I couldn't stop drinking. I was always alcoholic, and I drank in a way that was very different than other people, but I was able to use other things to get better. So I was able to use the relationship. I was able to use the job. I was able to use, goals, exercise, whatever it was. And I could do that for a little bit until I couldn't anymore. And it took a long time for me to hit that bottom because I kept using other things as a higher power. So the bottom line is that the powerlessness is in me as a person, as an alcoholic. If I don't have God as a higher power, that's where the defense against the first drink comes from. I'm powerless when I'm sober. If I don't have a connection to a higher power, I'll get drunk again and again and again. So the defense has to come from God.
Yeah. So Janine makes great points. And later in the We Agnostics chapter, it talks about if when you honestly want to, you cannot stop drinking entirely. Have you tried to stop? Or while drinking, you have little control of the amount you take, you are probably an alcoholic, of which only a spiritual experience can conquer. So it's saying exactly what she's talking about. Have you tried to quit, but haven't been able to? Because you're powerless, even though you can get some time in, eventually you pick up again. Or while drinking, the allergy, you have little control of the amount you take. Both, there's two powerlessnesses. And that's really important to know. Most people just think the powerlessness is once you put it in your body. No, the first powerlessness, and the most important one, is the one that you pick up the drink sober. And if you're able to not pick up the drink, but not work with a good relationship with God, like we said, you will seek relationships, jobs, you'll seek anything. You will wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world and try to get happy by managing your life well and just getting everything in order. But the suffering of that is acute and it's constant, and it never lets up. There's little periods of relief in your life, but then the restless, irritable, discontented is on you again. And then, suicide looks like a good option to lots of sober alcoholics, right? Lots of them won't do it if they got kids and shit, but some will.
Also, I think coming out of treatment, there was a couple of lanes I saw going on. There was people that were going to meetings and were really trying to work the steps. And I started noticing that there was a bit of a difference in, like, I could see there was some calmness in them, and that there was some enthusiastic attitude around the program. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to a meeting. There was like the two streams, and the other people that were staying sober were back to the business of being self-satisfied, where, like, you get your license back and you get your job back and you get your kids back and your family's like, welcoming you back as a sober person, and all these things feel like the gifts of God. Like, oh, God is just so good, and God is, my recovery is going so well, and not really putting the faith in where we need to put it in, like the step 6 stuff that he's talking about, where like you got to get uncomfortable a little bit, because if a person goes back to their old zone, the comfort zone, and things haven't changed, nothing's actually really changed. You've just achieved a bunch of things, and that doesn't keep a person sober. And so I remember early on, Bill was telling me, the shelf life of a alcoholic that does that is, 8 to 16 months. And I was like, and then it was 8 to 16 months. I started seeing a lot of people kind of dropping off. And the biggest thing that I recommend to people that I've done for myself is, like, I just did not get into relationships. And I believed Bill and other people that were like, this will really mangle up your recovery. And I see how, looking back, it's like getting into a relationship is, I did it out of treatment very briefly. And it was like, how on earth was I supposed to form a healthy relationship when I didn't know who I really was? I didn't discover who I really was till I was doing step 6 through step 10 and kind of figuring that out. When I moved myself away from the defects and I was doing these different things, I'm like, geez, this is who I really am. Okay. Like I had no idea who I was. So to form a healthy relationship with somebody while I'm trying to figure out who I am, and then they're figuring out who they are, their own recovery, like, it's total nonsense. And like the what I see happening is like these relationships have the same kind of shelf life as, you know, the 8 to 16 months. And then people don't make it out of that zone very often because the newness and the novelty of the relationship wears off and the pink cloud of the relationship wears off. And just like it does for the pink cloud of recovery, if you're not actually working the steps, it dies off, and then you're left with the reality of life, the reality of the relationship, that two broken people were coming together with a Band-Aid situation, and that's not sustainable. And yeah, so if I could recommend anything, I do recommend this, is to like try your best to stay out of relationships until you have a really good understanding of who you are. And that, to me, like for me, that's only just happened like within lately. Like it was around a year where I started to even understand what I like to do and what are my real hobbies and what are my real opinions. And I was always like comfortable talking in front of people, and I thought that I was authentic, but I see now that I didn't really know my own truth. So I was talking a lot, but I don't know if I knew what my authentic self was in the same way that I do now. And now I have a discernment where like being sober and being alone and having to rely on God instead of a human power has given me the ability now to discern. Like if somebody asks me out, I can be like, you know, like I don't think that that's something I want to settle for. You know, I know the kinds of things that I want to do through my sex ideals, and I can stand by that because I feel like I've put myself back together in enough of a way that I can be okay alone. So I don't have to take this because I'm lonely, or take this because I feel bad and I'm people pleasing, or so all these things have changed for me. And like, I've never, ever been comfortable being by myself. I've always like either had loneliness take me down, or I've like had fear of like the end of the world. It used to be a thing, and I didn't want to be alone for that. And there's all kinds of silly things that would get me into relationships and keep me into relationships. People pleasing was a huge one. So I think that that's been like the biggest thing for me in getting the type of like recovery that I wanted. I think the biggest thing has been being able to be by myself and just trusting that if I did the things off my sex ideals, and it was like, if I'm going to message someone when I'm bored or lonely, what would I do instead? I will call my sponsor. I will work with others. I will hang out with my kids, whatever. And I did that for a period of time. And all those little moments added up to me suddenly being okay with myself. And I never thought that recovery could be like that. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know how I got onto relationships with that, but.
Awesome. Okay, let's keep going, and we will be touching what she talked about many times throughout this study. Okay, the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. So there's different types of alcoholics it goes through here. But I'm just going to tell you, it doesn't fucking matter. None of this matters. But when I work with people, they're always like, oh, which one am I? Which one am I? Doesn't matter. But let's read it anyway. I don't even know why they put this in here. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over remorseful, make many resolutions, but never a decision. There's the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There's the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There's the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there are the types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They're often able, intelligent, and friendly people. All these and many others have one symptom in common. This is all that matters. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. That's the only thing that really matters. All of the types don't matter. If you go through the step 1 literature, the first like 4 chapters, including the doctor's opinion, which isn't actually a chapter, you'll know what you are. And hopefully you're tuning into the spiritual malady part of this program. Okay, This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. That's really important. You have to, like step 2, right? Came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, could restore us to sanity. You have to come to believe that you're separate and you're a distinct entity. You are not the same as a normal average tempered drinker. You don't have the biology the same anymore as a normal person. And understanding that and going, okay, I am different. I am different. And I can never safely use drugs or alcohol in any form ever again. Even at the doctor's, when I need painkillers, I got to be careful. Like these kind of things. That'll set off the allergy, and then the sprees are coming again, right? So it's really important to understand we're a distinct entity. And step 1, all of the chapters of step 1 really describe that in a good way.
I'm just gonna say my 2 cents on this. And when I read this, I think of like the doctors at this hospital are sitting around and they're conferencing. They're doing their doctor thing, and they're like, this guy's like, he's like those guys, you know, that he's quitting and then he feels really bad. I think he really does feel really bad. So I don't know why he's, you know. Then there's this guy he's always on the wagon, and he's always, and it's like, to me, it's like conversations doctors have had, just like we've gotten labels over the years in the DSM with it. This is like the beginning of the DSM, you know, there's these types, and then there's this type, and then there's that type. And it's just, I think when I read it, it's just a way that the doctors have been talking amongst each other, trying to sort out like, what is with this alcoholism? And like, I view it also as a bit of a warning, and also something to pay attention to when you're working with others. Like, you're going to have these types of people, and like a manic depressive type is going to be probably out of your realm of what you can advise and what you can maybe tell that person to go for some outside help, because this whole chapter, it's going to be really complicated. Or you're going to find somebody who's not going to believe you that they can't take a drink over and over. They'll keep going, oh, I remember, that's a type. And so I think it's more like, I don't know, this guy processing the types of alcoholics, he's like, I don't know. But to me, that's what I get when I read it, and that's what I talk about with people when I go through this part of the book.
Fuck, that was amazing. Thanks. I had no idea. I just thought it was useless information, but you made good sense of that.
You're welcome. I wasn't going to say anything, and then he's like, I don't know why they wrote this part. I'm like, oh, I guess. Are you kind of asking? I guess I'll kind of tell you. My take on it.
Okay, no, that was amazing. And that's, you know, I think as we start sponsoring, that stuff's kind of important. Like, you got to identify, like, hopefully you're working with people that are like you at first. And I always find creator will bring you the people that are broken in the same place as you're broken. And then as you're working with them, it's like, whoa, they're just like me, right? But if you sponsor long enough and you sponsor enough people, you're going to come across all types. And learning how to navigate all the different types is really important, because you'll get, if you're the real egocentric alcoholic, you're going to get pissed at the depressives, right? Because they don't operate the same. But it teaches you a lot of like really, you know, in-depth processes and patience and a whole bunch of things, right? And if you're the depressive, you don't want to work with an egocentric. But if you keep doing it, that's where the healing happens, right? That's where the compassion's built. That's where the love actually is for the other person and for yourself, and it comes over time. Okay. It has never been by any treatment which we are familiar permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Okay, abstinence is the solution. The problem is that we're powerless over abstinence, which is why we need God, right? We can't just be abstinent, because we will succumb to the desire. We'll fail to resist. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About a year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life, was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed for him that there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan, the detailed proposal to achieve a goal outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger. So he's just describing the psychic change from a despairing, nervous wreck who probably couldn't even look anyone in the eye to this man who is shining and glowing and, brimming over with self-confidence. And the guy's like, dude, I don't even know you. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn determined to die. He was rescued by a search party and in desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment was a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex, his depression was so great, that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is a fine specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. Dr. William D. Silkworth.
So when I go through this with people, I talk like those two cases are really, I always think of like, what was he trying to get at? Like everything's put in here so intentionally. So I really look at like, what was he really doing here? And the first one I realized when I broke that one down, it's like, this guy was at the end of the rope. He had all the physical things going on. By the time that he was, getting under the doctor's care here, he had the stomach problems were going on, and they thought that he probably had something like Korsakoff. But once they removed the alcohol, he'd lost everything, and his physical health was right on the wire to the point that they thought that he had, permanent brain damage. But they removed the alcohol, and, I think there was probably some detox in here, and then he outlined the plan in the book, and the guy accepted it. And then a year later, so to me, that's like, it doesn't take a long time to go from a state of like, this guy was at hell's gates physically, hell's gates mentally, like it looked like brain damage. He had lost everything. And only a year later, he's brimming with confidence, and he's like, so it doesn't take a long time. So this is like, to me, this is like a message of hope to somebody if you're working with them and they seem like they've fallen so far down that it's like, but look at this guy. He had all the physical problems, all the mental problems, and he had lost everything. And only a year later, he presents and this doctor doesn't even know him. So to me, that's like the most amount of hope that you can possibly have here. This guy was at the wire in all ways. And then the second one, you've got a guy who all he wants is this willpower so that he doesn't have to drink. That's all he's asking for. And then the doctor says, okay, well, do the steps, whatever. So he does the steps, and then he finds he doesn't even need the willpower. The steps gave him something so much more than that. So it's not like he's white knuckling it and he's got to use willpower. The obsession to drink was removed, and he's a free man. And so those are two very these are extreme cases of what we want so badly, and it doesn't have to take a long time, and we're not going to be white knuckling it.
Awesome. Okay, so that's the end of the doctor's opinion.
Okay, we would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, Pamunkey, and I don't want to pronounce that wrong. What? Nope. Canny First Nations, thank you, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3.
Okay, I'm gonna pray out loud. Janine will pray out loud. Can we have 2 volunteers from the crowd? Corey, 1, Wyatt, 2. Kahyu, Isagam Pisam, no Gate Wasting, Xanap Yutin, Okawi Mao, Ai, Victim Agano, Creator, Creation, God. I ask for your guidance today. I ask for your willingness and your courage and your strength to try to do a good study here today. I ask for the experiences in my past life and the experiences in my most recent experiences and whatever I need to do to bring to the surface to help heal myself and to help others. Creator, I ask for the words and the clarity of mind today as we get into this, and I ask that you shake away the jitters. I ask that you keep an open mind for myself and everybody in here, that we're able to learn something new about ourselves, about the program, and about our Creator. I thank you for the opportunity, my God. Hi.
God, thank you for this opportunity to use the space to get together and work on bettering ourselves and connecting, learning how to be happy and effective in recovery, and learning how to have true friendships with people for the first time for some of us, and learning how to keep those friendships for the first time for some of us. And theme that's been coming up this past week that I want to pray for is just the idea of you being there when we're standing on the mountain, knowing that we didn't get there by ourselves, and also while we're in the valley, knowing that we're not alone. And learning to have humility in both those cases, humility to know that we can't do these things on our own, and that when we're alone, humility to know that we can ask for help.
So we're right where Janine ended us last week.
I hope you guys are all excited about these 2 paragraphs. We set the bar really high for this.
Doctor's opinion, XXVII.
Where are you gonna say?
Let's reread this.
Okay. Where do you want me to stop? Okay, so we're starting right after the letter. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon us his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we were sure that our bodies were as sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as the ex-problem drinker, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on a spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he then has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer.
Okay. So on the previous page, there's 3 things in this first 2 pages of the doctor's opinion.
So in the first 2 pages of the doctor's opinion, it actually gives me everything I need to know for the solution to my whole life. It highlights 3 things super importantly, okay? The first thing was on the first page, which we read last week. I'm just going to touch base on it again. It is on the first page of the doctor's opinion. And it says, as part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do still likewise with others. This has become the basis of the rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. So essentially it's saying, as part of my rehab, I should be helping other alcoholics. It's part of my recovery. I'm impressing upon you, if I'm working with you, that you must do likewise with still others. And when I have somebody approach me and they ask me to work with them, I don't just say yes right away. I say, okay, we're going to have a coffee. And then we go have a coffee and I qualify them. I ask them a bunch of questions. Give me your story in 5 or 10 minutes or less. And are you willing to pass this on when you're done? Because that's the deal. And if they're not really willing to pass this on, you know, I really try to guide them to another sponsor. Because part of the deal for me is we pass this on. You can't keep what you don't have. The problem is most people in the program won't do that part. And as we read last week in the chapter Working with Others, this is the foundation stone of our recovery. It says a kindly act once in a while won't fit the bill. Never avoid these responsibilities if you assume them. The words are really strong in that chapter Working with Others about what we're talking about. And when you take this literature as word like I do, and as Janine does, my buddy Jesse does, you start really going, okay, this is what it's telling me. It's kind of like we talked about the blueprint, the plan of recovery. Part of the blueprint is understanding the literature and what the literature is really saying. Sometimes we'll just graze over it and think we know what it says. So now back to what Janine just read. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. Okay, great. As laymen, our opinion to its soundness may of course mean little. As like doctors and scientists, you know, our opinion to the soundness of it, because it's hard to prove, may of course mean little, right? That's why I believe the mental health world doesn't really acknowledge this as a disease as far as the allergy, because it's really hard to prove, which is in the book, it talks about we develop the phenomenon of craving. A phenomenon is hard to prove, right? They have all these other world phenomenons in the world and they don't really know the answer to them. They're trying to figure it out. And this is one answer that they don't know, but they try to figure everything out through the mental part. But there's way more to the human being and to this world than any scientist or science can figure out. And part of that phenomenon of craving is we don't really know exactly how it works. But as laymen, our opinion to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, it makes good sense. It explains many things for me, which I could not otherwise account. And once I read that and I started learning that once I put it in my body, I don't really have the control. And it's not the 5th drink or the 10th drink, it's the first drink. For the real alcoholic or addict, you put the first drink in your bloodstream, you have just triggered this phenomenon of craving. And you may have not been an alcoholic at some point in your drinking career. Maybe you were a moderate drinker, graduated to heavy drinker, and eventually you became allergic to alcohol and you have this allergy now. Or maybe you had it from the first time you drank. So it doesn't even really matter how you got there. The point is if you are that, and if you go through this material of step 1, you will know that, then you have but 2 alternatives. One is to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of your intolerable situation, or the other one is to accept spiritual help. And me as a sponsor working with so many people, Janine would back me and my buddy Jesse would back me, that is the facts, right? And most of us could probably believe that about ourselves. Without this program and the spiritual help, we'd be fucked. Excuse my language. I'm trying not to swear so much. So, and it makes good sense. It explains many things for which we could not otherwise account. Okay, so that explains the allergy. But what about the crazy thinking? What about the the selfish thinking? What about how I work in fear and jealousy and judgment? You know, when I first heard my sponsor speak, those are the things that he explained, many things for which I could not otherwise account. He explained in his speaker tape, the first one that I ever saw, he was me. And I think like that's the benefit of what this study does, is we're able to get into your mind. And this is more later down the road in this study, because we get into so much of the defective character, we barely focus on the substance, but we're getting into your mind. And we're getting in there and fucking, you know, I know a lot of people that have come to the studies go, they were pissed at me because they thought I was actually talking right to them. And how many people have said that, like everyone in the study, because that's what we're doing. We're getting into your mind. And the book talks about, we disturb them on the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The question of alcoholism has barely anything to do with the substance. It has to do with this crazy shit that goes on in my head. That's the question of alcoholism. That's disturbing you on that. And like I said last week, we're going to say things that are going to shift things in you, and it's going to make you think. Sometimes you're going to be mad at what we say. Sometimes you're going to have the light bulb go off and it's going to go ding, because we're going on the inside and we're stirring shit up. So like I said, if you do get stirred up and you do get triggered, you know, don't leave. Come talk to me. Come talk to Janine. Keep your eye out for those people. Go talk to them, because this disease is in full effect when we get into those states of mind. Okay? And so on the next paragraph, talks about we work out our solution to life on the spiritual, altruistic plane. Spiritual is the spiritual disciplines contained within this program. There are many, inventory being a massive part of it. Most people's spiritual definition doesn't really include inventory, personal inventory. It includes prayer, includes meditation, and includes trying to be nice. Well, for real spiritual growth, we have to look at our actions and behaviors and motives. And we have to bring those to the surface and want to change them. But first, we got to see what they are. And this program actually reveals what those things are. And through the disciplines, which is why step 10 and 11 are disciplines, 10 is an inventory step, and 11 is a power step. Once we relinquish self, we will be of service. That is the way that it works, because we're wired to be of service as humans, but we are trained to be selfish by society. So we work out our solution on the spiritual. And I always like to say the altruistic plane is actually more important than the spiritual. Okay, it's equally as important, but it's kind of more important. Does anyone know what altruistic means? Others focused? Basic idea? Okay. Okay, those are all decent answers. I'm going to quote the one out of the dictionary. Unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. Again, unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. So when I first started doing service in this program back, 8 years ago when I got sober, and I finished my steps and I was chairing meetings, and I wasn't doing any of that unselfishly. I was doing it very selfishly because I didn't want to die. I wanted to stay alive, so I listened to my sponsor. And I was told by members and people in the program that you do service. I didn't want to do that shit. When my phone would ring and it was a new sponsee, I didn't want to answer it, but I did it, right? And maybe I'd go help somebody looking for a pat on the back. So I wasn't doing any of these acts of altruism. At that stage, it's an act of altruism. It's not altruistic because I'm not doing it unselfishly. I'm not dedicating my life to the service and welfare and happiness of somebody else. I'm doing it for me. So it's very selfishly tied. So just because you do an act of altruism doesn't mean it's altruistic. But we got to start somewhere, right? So it's a good place to start is to do the act of altruism, go against what your ego wants to do and go ahead and help somebody. Go chair a meeting, answer your phone reluctantly. That's how it has to start, honestly. And then I noticed about maybe 100 sponsees in or a couple years in, I started going, wow, I feel good when I help people. And then I'd feel like shit. And then I'd be like, I want to feel good. So I'd call somebody and say, hey, do you want to do some work? Can I chair a meeting? Because I knew that it made me feel good. So the motive is still me. So I'm still doing it because I want to feel good, but I'm not quite as selfish in the motive as I was when I started. So the act is still not altruistic because there's a selfish motive there. So as I do these reluctant actions and I get to a place where I'm doing it a little less reluctant, but I'm doing it still because I want to feel good. And most of us, we say, I feel so good when I do that. And then we do that because we like that feeling, right? We got to really discern, is it altruistic yet? Or is it still, I'm looking for something? Okay. And a lot of people will sponsor because they don't want to be left out or whatever the reasons. And you got to look at the motive behind it. But down the road, I think what happens organically is you just want to help people without reservation. It's without reservation. So the step 7 talks about without reservation. And that's what we want to get to. Doing these things unselfishly, devoting ourselves to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others without reservation. What's the reservation? I usually think, am I going to lose something that I have, or am I not going to get something I want? How am I going to look? Once that's gone, then altruism is actually playing its part in your life. And that's really important because that's where the solution lies. That's where the freedom really is. That's the goal. And that is what step 7 is. Want to add anything?
This is a talking stick for everybody online. There it is. I'll add a little bit, thanks.
Oh my God.
I know. Okay, so just going back with just how I sponsor, I just wanted to touch on this bit. I don't know if I would have went onward if I had somebody say like, are you going to do the stuff? Are you going to go out and sponsor? Because I don't know if I would have at step 1. So that's kind of how I go at it, is that I feel like people are it's case by case completely for me. I know that there's women that want to just get in there and they want to sponsor, and that's easy and apparent. Then there's some that are like, they wouldn't say yes, even though by the time they get to step 12, they're sponsoring. So I think it's important to consider that too. And I don't have like a hard and fast on, you need to get out there and you need to sponsor. I think that if a person is really willing to get sober and to make changes in their life, that they can be coached and they can be supported in making that transition. What Bill was just talking about the spiritual and the altruistic stuff, this has been, I think this is a valuable point too, in remembering this with defects, that when we start out, we're not doing the stuff because we want to, we're doing it because we're told to, because it's selfish and we're going to get drunk if we don't. And that the altruistic stuff, the true humility, that comes after. So when we are turning over our defects and like the anger and the lust and the things that are really glaring, like we don't want to do that initially. And over time, it just becomes something that we do because it's really beneficial, and we see that it's working in our spiritual life, and it becomes much easier. I'll start right down. Yeah, the qualifying stuff, I think that's become very important to me. I used to think that because it's a design for living, this can be applied to just everybody, and it can, and it's helpful for everybody. But the thing that's unique about the alcoholic, we get that gift of like the gift of desperation, but the gift of being an alcoholic, where we don't have any other choice but the spiritual toolkit or the alcoholic death. So we're backed into a corner. What are we going to choose? Where people who, I had an experience with this woman who needed to be sponsored out of a treatment center, and I had the philosophy of like, the steps will help everybody. But I was busy, and I realized quickly that she just wanted a life coach, and she didn't want to, really tackle the steps. And so there's other people that needed the help. And so now the qualifying thing is on my radar because the willingness isn't the same. People might be in a bind, but you know, with personal problems, and that might make them willing in the moment, but they're not faced with the same situation as an addict trying to get sober. And so that's kind of been my focus, that urgency is more important to me. So I have actually started qualifying over the course of this past year, just to see if they're really an alcoholic. I did write down a medical point when you were talking about the way that if educators could come, and I was thinking about why, when I was working with addicts, why this wasn't like part of it, because now I'm like, if only we would qualify people in you know, the addiction world using the book, it would be way better. But I don't know if that could be a thing, because as alcoholics, we tell lies, and we tell lies to ourselves, and when we get help, we maybe are telling the truth, and then the ego rebuilds itself, and then we change our story, and it's very confusing for the person getting help, and then it's also confusing for the counselor. But it's confusing for the counselor because I remember, you know, like, you never know if a person's actually a problem drinker or an alcoholic. You know, if you don't have this knowledge from the book, problem drinking looks like alcoholism and vice versa. And so I think that causes some confusion, and I know that causes confusion in the medical world, because the two can look the same, but they're not the same. And we learn that here, and we learn that in the rooms, and we see that play out. But people who aren't in the rooms or working with addicts in the same way that we do, they don't see it the same way that we do. And even like in hearing about it, I think that there's a difference as well in hearing about it than actually being in the trenches together, because we have the weight and depth of the message, because we've been there. And then we know alcoholism like no one else really can. That covers all my points.
Okay, I want to touch on one more point on altruistic stuff. So we're heavily talking about sponsorship here. That's not necessarily just the case, right? We can be altruistic or altruistic action at home with our kids, with our husband and wife, at work. We can do these things everywhere. And when we talk about this program, it's like the pennies and the nickels. You watch the little things and the dollars will take care of themselves. You practice altruistic action little by little everywhere you go, and it will eventually take. And you will eventually down the road be doing things unselfishly for other people. And not just for a pat on the back or to get something out of it. You're just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. There's another component that most people don't think about when we talk about altruistic action. If we're not there yet, but I'm going to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, because that's what I do. I said I punch home 10 or 15 things. If selfish self-centeredness is at the root of my trouble, then I need to be rid of self, okay? And step 6 is fully emphasized on relinquishment of self. And as I'm interacting day to day with other people in my life, if I can be aware of what's going on in the interaction, and I can be aware that, holy shit, I'm being selfish, being self-righteous anger, selfish lust, whatever, in that moment, and I can call on God and ask him for help, I'm sacrificing my own shit for the benefit of them. And that is a heavy part of altruistic action. But it usually doesn't come till down the road in this program. And most people think that when you are doing altruism, it's just the action. Sometimes it's your thought. Sometimes it's your motive. And even though we may suffer the pain of keeping our mouth shut and not saying something that we think we should say, it's an altruistic act, but it's based in self, so it's not actually altruism yet. So faith alone is insufficient. To be vital must be accompanied by self-sacrifice, understanding self, and unselfish constructive action. Through the understanding of self and sacrificing it in the given moment, it will take you to the unselfish constructive action. And that is essentially what the step 3 prayer is talking about. The step 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, that's everything that it's actually about. So, that's it. Any questions? Why is there a ringing? Go ahead. What I mean is step 11, typically if step 11 has a 0 to 10 availability in it, most people only get to a 2 out of the use of a step 11 effectiveness. because they don't understand step 10. Step 10 is about what I just said, self-sacrifice. So step 11, if we don't grow in it, it doesn't become a power step. It becomes a step that is just done as part of a routine that doesn't really promote a lot of change. But once you understand the rest of the steps before 11, it's a pure power step. It gives you God's power, Creator's power, and you can use that in a really effective way that is actually unbeknownst to most people in the program. Because like I said, it's generous to say, in my opinion, that most people will only get a 2 out of a 10 usage out of what step 11 is. Go ahead, Don. No? Okay. Okay. Anything else? Thanks.
Oh my God.
I'm getting a round of applause for not swearing.
And I'm just gonna try to simplify what you just said. I think he's meaning that step 10 really clears the channel. You got to be doing that effectively so that when you're in step 11, you can actually connect. And that's where we're getting the inner resource. We're tapping into the power that is bigger than ourselves. That's where we're doing it. And we're using it to source ourselves so that we're able to get out there in life and we don't tire, you know, where that's the part of when in the step 11 prayer, where it's like, we're not burning our energy stupidly and foolishly and running around like just burning our own self-will. We're tapping into the power greater than ourselves through step 11 and getting the answers. They intuitively come. We're not rushing out. We're putting time and space between things. And then we can use that to go out instead of. So that's what he means by the power step.
Okay.
Oh, me?
Yep.
Okay, the doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with the alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as the medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was, therefore, a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside of our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care at the hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas that he put into practical application at once. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them were amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death.
Okay. Was that making noise because of me?
You were yelling.
Okay. So what I want to highlight here is this the doctor writes is the same story of Bill W. as we read on the first page of the doctor's opinion. So he's reiterating the same visit from Bill W. at the hospital, okay? And what I want to highlight, like we did last week, is the doctor is one of the most famous doctors in North America treating alcoholic and drug addiction. He was many years experience as medical director of one of the oldest, most prolific hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. So this guy was no slouch. He was one of the best doctors in the world, probably treating us, okay? And then next paragraph down, second after that. We doctors have realized for a long time, so not just him, but all the doctors in the medical fraternity. He's kind of speaking for the whole of the medical fraternity. Those doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to these alcoholics. Some type of moral rearrangement was of urgent importance. And they all knew this. but its application, how to do that? How do we produce this moral rearrangement? It presented difficulties beyond their conception. They had no idea. They didn't know how to deal with us, but they knew that something needed to be done in here, but they couldn't figure it out. With our ultra-modern standards and our scientific approach to everything, we were perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge.
Hold for 1 sec. I think that this paragraph actually stands true today, that professionals would say the same thing, where they can see that something needs to be done, but how?
Yeah, and I would agree 100%, and that's, very important. So it says, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside their synthetic knowledge. What does he mean by that sentence? Anyone? Okay, Chad nailed it. The powers of God that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. So the doctor is basically a scientist, and they won't use the word God. It's very similar to our society today. They won't talk about God. They won't talk about creator. They might send you for some meditation, but even at the conferences that I go to on addictions, the amount of spiritual talk is so minimal. It's all mental health. But it says right here that these, with their ultra modern standards, their scientific approach to anything, they're not much help to us. But with the scientific approach and the drugs that they use and the methods that they use, for the moderate drinker, it works fine. For the heavy drinker, it can work pretty good too. But for the alcoholic, we do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. So that's really important. And the doctor who's been watching us for so long, he's the one who just said the powers of God, but he used powers of good that lie outside our science. So he's been watching, seeing something happening. So on the next paragraph, many years ago, the synthetic knowledge is drugs.
Everything but the God stuff.
Yeah, everything but the God stuff. Okay, so back in the day, they used to perform lobotomies, belladonna therapy. They used to try to get you to impose your own self-will. They tried to get you to do all these different methods and to try to change your own self. But it didn't work, and it doesn't work. And there's more evidence to what we're saying in here. So the synthetic knowledge is anything medical in the medical fraternity. It's the opposite of God. Okay. So many years ago, go ahead. Okay, sorry. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book, so again, it's Bill W., just like on the previous page, okay, came under care in our hospital. Here he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. So that was Bill W. coming back to the town's hospital with a few ideas in his pocket. He had worked with the Oxford group a little bit, gained some knowledge there. He had already been working with Dr. Silkworth, and Silkworth was trying to sell him on the idea of the allergy. And Bill came back with a little bit of a plan. So later, Bill W. shows up. He requests the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here at the town's hospital, where Bill used to be a patient. And with some misgiving, we consented. So Bill comes in, hey, can I help you guys? I think I got an idea that might help us out here. And the doctors are like, dude, you're just a stockbroker that's an alcoholic and you're hopeless. And I don't know. And with some misgiving, they consented. So they decided, okay, we're going to give you a shot, but we're going to fucking watch you.
I feel like it went down kind of like, I don't know what we're doing, and this is really unethical. That's what I was saying last week, where they're like, okay, well, we're willing to just try anything because we've tried everything we can think of and nothing's working. And also just to the point of sponsoring, when the question comes up to me, like, how early is too early to sponsor? I go back to this part and I'm like, I don't know, like Bill was sponsoring in his hospital gown. So I don't know.
So with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through, though, have been most interesting. So the doctors are watching, and they're watching Bill go to these different people. And Bill's not talking much about their alcoholism. He's talking to these guys about his alcoholism, his spiritual malady, and his relationship with the Creator, right? In fact, many of them are amazing. So now the doctor's saying, holy shit, look at this guy. Look what he's doing. This is amazing. We've been trying to figure this shit out for hundreds of years, and this guy waltzes in here with a little bit of a game plan, and this is amazing. They're like blown away, these guys. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them. That's the program. We help each other with no asking for reward or anything. As we have come to know them, the absence of profit motive. We don't want anything from them. Their community spirit is inspiring. The fellowship and how we just love each other. And we just, you know, you're an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, you piss your pants, I piss my pants, high five, right? That community spirit is indeed inspiring. To one who has labored long and wearily. That's really descriptive. This doctor's labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. Basically to the point where he's burnt out. Like, you know, imagine having to try to help us for like your whole life and not actually having a solution, what that would do to you. I can barely handle it at all normally. Like back in the day before I was an alcoholic, my brother was an addict, alcoholic, and I was kind of sober, but I would try to deal with him and I'm like, how do I even do this? I can't even like sit with this guy, right? So imagine this doctor and all these doctors, like how burnt out they would have got, trying to impose their will. This is awesome. They believe in themselves and they believe more in the power which pulls these chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. What I like to say here is, for me, I believe in myself today. I didn't always believe in myself. I had a lot of self-worth issues. My whole life was based on what you thought of me and how you viewed me, how much money I made, what I drove, where I lived, what I looked like, how I sounded. My whole self-confidence was based in what everyone else thought about me. And then I lost it all. Pride goeth before the fall. I fell. It was all gone. It was blackness. And then I came here and I've done this work. And I built a good, strong relationship with my God. And I believe in myself today. But I believe much more in the power that pulled this chronic alcoholic back from the gates of death. With my relationship with God, I can be the best version of me who I ever wanted to be. And I can be lifted up by that power and feel good and confident. And when I make decisions, I'm not making decisions out of fear and insecurities. I make decisions out of love for myself and truth. But that's only because I try to rely on my Creator, my higher power. The more that I get to know my higher power, the more that I get to know me, because my Creator is actually in me. So these men believe in themselves. And they believe more in the power that pulls the chronic alcoholic back from the gates of death. And as we get further into the study, in step 7, there's a line that says, the most profound result of all. Out of all of this work we do, out of everything we do, the most profound result of all was our change in our attitude towards God. Why? Because God becomes the attitude. What is God? God is love. Love becomes the attitude in everything that we do. And that is a beautiful place to get. As a human, maybe it's not always like that, but it can be like that most of the time. And I sit here, used to be violent, angry, road rager. My family would walk on eggshells. Today, I'm not like that. But I'm telling you, I've done a ton of work in this program. And I know a lot of people here who, like Shonda, I remember when she first came in, she's a different woman. And there's many people I know in this room that are completely different people because they built a true relationship with God. And it's not a theoretical one. The theory of God is not enough. You will drink with that one. God has to be applied and working in your life through a practical application of spiritual disciplines and altruistic action. That's how this works. The theory of God will not suffice. And step 3 actually alludes to that, which I won't get into right now, but we will talk about that.
I just want to add to that truth is also part of how I explain like the attitude of God, because sometimes people can think Bill's pretty mean. I've heard that a lot, that he can come across like, but it's love. It's just like telling the truth. It doesn't sometimes feel loving, because I think that the idea that love should feel a certain way is just an old belief that I had to shake from society, telling me that love had to be like this. But to me today, love is telling the truth to somebody, and love doesn't exist without the truth. So when I talk about that with people, I think God is love and truth.
And that's a really good point. Because when you walk authentically in the being of who you're supposed to be, you don't need to justify yourself anymore. And if you justify yourself, it's wrong. So walking in that integrity and walking in that image and likeness of your creator, and being open to realize you can make mistakes, and being receptive to information and what people say, and really looking at that, right? And then moving forward in it. But it's important to walk with truth. And the journey to truth is based in love. So real truth is always based in love. But you will hear people all the time saying, oh, it's my truth, it's my truth, it's my truth. Well, it's my traumas that make me believe this, so that's your truth. Trauma is based in fear. Trauma is based in pride and ego. Ego is edging God out. And if God is love, then the ego is working in absence of God. But you can use the best of your intentions to run your life, but under the intention is motive. So most people run their life on intention, but they still fight everyone and everything, but they're not really fighting everyone and everything. They're fighting themselves. That's really the deal. So as you uncover the ego, as you take some blind leaps of faith to try to uncover, discover, and recover, you can get to a place where you're walking with your own truth and you don't need to justify it. So when people, like Janine said, may think I'm whatever they think, that's okay. And a lot of people think whatever they think about me. And you know what? I'm totally cool with it. I show up. I'm consistent. I'm persistent. And I let that shit go. And every now and then it might bother me, but I have some pillars that I can talk to get out what it is. I'm going to share an example. So the other night, me and my girlfriend, she wasn't on time and I was waiting, driving around the block. She was at the bar, and my girlfriend's cool. She's normal, right? She was at her bar with the friends, but it was late and I was fucking annoyed. That's the bottom line. She got in the car and she's all happy to see me and shit. And I'm just like, grr. And I don't want to fucking laugh and smile, right? I'm happy to see her, but I'm in my pride zone. Like, don't you know you're wasting my time right now? And it's like 10-1. And I don't want to give that up, right? And then we go home and like, she's really trying to get me out of it, right? And she's really a sweetie, right? And I know, and then I'm just sitting there kind of grumpy and she's like, what can I do? And I'm like, nothing, fucking nothing. And I'm just holding this. And I know inside, I'm like, what are you doing? Why you not let this go? Just talk to her and get it out. And I'm like, nope. And then I remember like a while back, I was thinking in my life, I'm like, fucking, I kind of hate love, right? I got a love-hate relationship with love. Because love makes you do shit against your pride, and it just fucks things up sometimes, right? And being single is easier, and then falling in love is hard. And then I remember, one sec, Ron, and I was talking to her and I said, I have a love-hate relationship with love. She's like, oh, really? What is it? And then I closed my eyes and I just started talking about this actual, like in my heart, love-hate relationship with love, because it's hard, right? And then I talked about it with my eyes closed for like 5 minutes, and then I opened my eyes and I'm like, I'm good now. But, like, it's fucking ain't easy, right? And I don't even know why I told you that story, but
I do.
Why?
So that I can say, and then she turned to you and said, Bill, time is a colonized thing and we are an abstract. We just flow with it and there is no sense of time. We don't, it was ish. She was just having her time till she was done. Ish.
Oh my God.
She got there when she got there.
Okay.
All right.
Ron, I agree 100%. So it wasn't love. It's my ego, right? But it's the journey. So again, like back to the journey of truth. You understand, and I'm with you. And like on the journey to truth, right? It's a journey. And sometimes the truth isn't the truth. And even though I was mad, that wasn't the truth. That was me learning what the truth was. And until I expressed it in my eyes closed, vulnerably with her, I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to tell her the truth and tell her like, I need to keep the edge, right? I can't give up the edge. It's like being naked running outside here. But that's where the gifts lie. That's where the gold is, right? And that truth was based in love, and that was the truth. And that's really what I wanted to say. I just couldn't. We've all experienced that. Being mad at somebody and then they apologize and they're super nice, but you still want to be mad at them, but you can't. Or you shouldn't be.
That's me and him all the time. Are we gonna, do you want to keep going or break? Or what do you want to do? Keep going?
No, let's go on a
Take a
break.
break? Okay. We are going to have a break. To the people online, we will be back in roughly
15, 20.
10, 15. We're going to compromise on a 15-minute break. Okay, so I had, before this book study started, I had committed to giving somebody a chip on a Monday night, but I'm here. So they agreed to come here and get their chip. So this is my first sponsee coming out of treatment. And so she's been along for my ride this whole time in recovery. And so I just wanted to speak about this a little bit as it pertains to sponsorship, because we've learned a couple of lessons along the way that I just wanted to share. Okay, so I think the first thing that I learned through this relationship was that sponsorship is often somebody's first step in trusting a higher power. When we admit that we're powerless over alcohol, it's really saying like, if I don't get help from something outside of myself, I'm going to end up drinking again. And so having somebody relying on me when I don't know if I was like ready for that coming right out of treatment, but the treatment center was really big on your 12-step, get out there and do the work. And in hindsight, it was really, really good, because she probably saved me from, getting swallowed up into the depths of the small town I was trying to escape from. Because I went back there and I was alone for the most part. There was not the same type of recovery community. And she would be phoning every day. And she phoned like just so diligently. And she was like, hey, and even if she didn't really have anything to say, she would be phoning. And she just like, the most enthusiastic person that I've ever worked with, in that she would just go out and do it. She trusted completely in what I was saying, which was crazy, because I was just kind of given like, just call me every day, get some pillars, like, and I'll figure the rest out. That was kind of like what I was doing. Because if I didn't have 2 sponsees underneath me coming out of treatment, I wouldn't have been so rushed to figure it out, because I felt like I owed them some sort of explanation around like what step 6 and 7 was, because I wouldn't have known how to take someone through that after. So anyways, she phoned me all the time, and she was just so enthusiastic about the process and trusting about the things that were suggested to her. There was a couple of difficult situations in the treatment center, and I said, you gotta go own your part. just tell the truth. And then she would, and it would be so easy for her, it seemed. And so I just really admired her. And so I guess Bill was a big part of this for us, because I'm talking about Shanda. And so Bill was in front of me, kind of coaching me through what was going to come. And this is the whole idea around sober patterns, where I was really feeling lost, like it was early recovery and I didn't know what I was really doing, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And I didn't really know how to like go into the unknown. I was falling into, you know, trying to go back after jobs I thought I needed. And I was going through all these things, right? And then so Shanda was also calling, and we were going through these things together. And we were like, it was crazy. I think back of all the things. And one of the things that was big was she was calling and she was like, how do I know if God's a theory? And I'm like, let me ask Bill. So like, and then I would call Bill, and then he's like, I don't know. And it was so confusing. And I like, it's hard to explain what God is. God a theory? God's a theory to me. Like I explain to people now, like God's a theory until it comes to your step 6, where now you're either at a place where you're going to choose comfort and do what you always did, or you're going to choose character building and do the thing that you don't want to do. And when I was doing that, and when she was doing that, it was all the shit we didn't want to do. And there was lots of fear around it. Mostly there were so many big fears for both of us. We had like these external, like I had a window to move, and she had, you know, some challenges going on in the family, like some external pressure. And so it really just like shaped my understanding of recovery and of sponsorship, and of the importance of having other people who are able to guide you in a way that is from the book, so that the messages are consistent. And like I wasn't ever getting like just opinions. It was always like back to the book. And then I would give that to her. And there was we loved page 72, which was like, go at it with a proper display of morality and honesty, and you'll stand a better chance of getting what it is that you want. And the lessons, yeah. So I guess the final thing I'll share with you about this is that she fired me once at least, maybe twice. And yeah, and so it was challenging, because I came from a town that there wasn't a lot of cultural diversity, and she was moving towards like expanding her own culture, and we had to come to an understanding with that. And I think like she wasn't firing me because like it was because we were kind of going in different directions, but we really weren't. And it was like we had built so much history between us that when shit hit the fan for Shanda, she like, I don't know, he always tells me if there's an intuitive thought, pick up the phone, text them, do whatever, that's how I do it. And it's true. So I was going through a red light, or I was going through a green light, and I thought of her, and I was like, I better send her a text. So she was upset, and there was some stuff going down. And I said, well, meet me over here. I'm going to this meeting. And then she came, and then we sat in the vehicle and we talked for a couple hours and got back on track. And then we've been good. But like, we've learned that we've had to have some hard conversations where we didn't agree, and we had to get each other's perspective. And now looking back, there's been so much growth since then that it's like, that was silly to even like, I don't know why we were doing that, but this idea of empathy in that instead of giving up and doing what we've always done, which for me, it was avoid and not have the hard conversations and just go on to the next person. The relationship was, it's a place where this is a relationship we need to trust in, because like the relationship with your sponsor and with like, when you mess up, to be able to go back, and there's so much growth in the conflict. And so, you know, like attachment relationships, like emotionally attached people, you're going to have conflicts, and you're going to have like hard times. And in recovery, that's the first relationship where it should be a safe space that you hash it out. And, you know, like when you hurt each other's feelings or you misunderstand, to go back in that. And because that's been the most valuable lesson, is that there's so much wisdom that comes in the hindsight of things where like now the relationship becomes easy. So to just jump sponsors or to just like get pissed off and move on to the next person, because there's lots of people that will take people through the steps, to not give up. Like, don't give up unless it's like you're really not getting advice out of the book, because chances are it's your ego. And if you can work through that stuff, it's so valuable. Like, it's not replaceable to be able to have a relationship with someone with that history and that understanding and the things that you've worked through together. So I'm really happy to give this chip. This is like also the last year for me too, and all the lessons that came with this. And I'm really proud of you. And I'm really glad that we've stuck it out. And yeah, I love you. So.
Hi, I'm Shanda. I'm an addict. So the biggest, it was the truth telling. It was truth telling. Not that I'm a liar, but those hard truths that I wasn't able to speak on. That's where I faltered. And this wasn't very long ago where I faltered. And I was like, I was falling and I was really worried. And so when she sent me that text, I just left a visit with my kids, who are now in my care, by the way. So working this honestly saved my life. Like, working this for real and like honestly. And going back to Janine, when she sent me that text, I was just like, oh my God, thank you. Like, and so I got on the phone with her and I met her at that meeting and I was just like, I'm so scared. I don't know what I'm doing. And this is really tough for me. But when I was like on the train after we got off the phone and I was going to meet her, I was like, she's a God-centered woman. This is somebody that God put in my life. And he continued to do that from the get-go. Like, from the get-go, he was putting Janine in front of me. And I was just like, there was a deadline to do this step 5. And so when I went to ask her to do the step 5, I was just like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Right. So I did. And when she came to meet me to do the step 5, I was like, is there something that we have to sign? Like a disclosure or something to say that you're not going to spread all this stuff about me?
She wanted a confidentiality form.
And she's just like, no. And I was like, I thought she was kidding with me. I really did. And I was just like, but wait, you have to have something. But no, and so we went on and things like the conversations that we have around
it's a dessert.
God was totally a theory. And I was like, when I first heard that, when Bill first like said that, and Janine was relaying to me, and I was like, but he's not. And I was internalizing this in myself. And I was just like, but he's not. And I know he's not. And he totally was. Right. And like Bill says, he's not a theory. When you're doing that step 6, like continuously looking at yourself, you can't see self from self. So I am proud to have this. It's overdue. It's like we're a little bit overdue. So I'm glad to have this. Thank you so much.
Okay, and just quickly before we get going, sorry for the people online. I'm not sorry, actually. This is kind of the gifts of recovery, and recovery took me back to my culture, right? I was a First Nations guy that never wanted to be First Nation, which was at the root of a lot of my addiction. I've come a long way in my culture and learning and growing and, doing the things that I do within my culture now ceremonially, and I won't get into that. But I met a guy along the way in recovery. His name is Shane B, and he's in the room tonight. And he's often volunteered to help me and my elder and the guys that I Sundance with to get wood or sweat or to do whatever it is, right? Shane's always there to be of service. He's always, wanting more, right? And, I had this drum given to me by a guy that I know at work, and I already have a drum, and it sat on my desk, and the other day, it was about a week ago, I just had this intuitive thought, I'm gonna give this to Shane. Right? I know he's got a drumstick. He's got a drumstick, but he's got no drum. So I just want to give this to Shane. Say a few words. Slip down here so they can see you.
I'm grateful for this gift. I've been drumming and singing for 20 years. I do have a drumstick. And now I got a drum.
Okay, let's get down to business. So we will finish the doctor's opinion tonight, and that's probably about it. Which is good. Could be worse. Janine's been talking a lot.
Okay. Are we only there?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. So of course, the alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. And this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit, and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us for a while on the firing line. See the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become part of their daily work and of their sleeping moments, and the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel that after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement growing up among them.
Okay, let's stop there. Okay, back to the top of that page, XXVIII. It talks about the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol or drugs in any form at all. And that is the alcoholic, okay? We have this allergy and it doesn't occur in an average temperate drinker. Even in a heavy drinker, he does not have the allergy. Moderate drinker for sure does not, okay? We can never safely use drugs or alcohol in any form at all ever again. So there's a lot of people that just think they're alcoholics or they're just addicts. It doesn't matter to me. If you're an alcoholic, you're an addict. If you're an addict, you're an alcoholic. At some point, this will take you down to the bottom, like very bottom. The other thing is that us as people who might get injured or have, you know, medical issues, we go to the doctor and they give us painkillers and morphine or whatever it is, fentanyl. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a relapse start at the hospital when somebody took some painkiller just to ease the pain because the doctor said it was okay. So we got to be really diligent when we go to hospitals and they're going to administer sedatives to us for whatever it is or painkillers. And we got to be really careful, but that's where alcoholism kicks in. Because the person will be like, wow, I'm at the doctor. This is supposed to be like this. But in the back of their mind, they know this is a bad idea, but they go and try to seek some vicarious pleasure out of the drugs at the hospital. But once it hits our system, it changes us. So a lot of these people come out and they end up getting back on their substance of no choice. You know, I really love the the DOC, right? Drug of choice. What's your drug of choice? It's actually your drug of no fucking choice. This isn't a power of choice, right? But in the medical fraternity, it's drug of choice. It's for us, it's drug or alcohol of no choice. We have lost the power of choice. Next paragraph, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Most people know what that is if you've been in the book and you're sponsoring, but a lot of people don't. What that means is people will beg you to quit drinking and you won't be able to quit. It will seldom suffice. Your kids, stop, Dad, stop. Just, can you please just stop for me and, Johnny? No, he says yes, but he can't stop. For the wife, for the job, frothy emotional appeal for the real alcoholic and addict seldom suffices. Okay. The message that can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. So the message that can interest and hold you guys as alcoholics must have depth and weight. The depth is experience. The weight is something's working. So when we go into a meeting and we're sharing our experience, strength, and hope from the podium, the way that we go about this is we share the depth of our experience and the weight of what's working. That's the message that can interest and grab these alcoholic types. And you stay consistent with that. Far too often we go to meetings and people are sharing bullshit. They're sharing their drug logs. They're sharing, my cat pissed on my bed this morning and I don't know what to do, right? There's a ton of meetings that don't have a step as a topic. When you don't have a step as a topic, you're subject to your own opinion, theories, and ideas. And what does an alcoholic like to talk about most? Themselves. So you just open up a can of worms for a whole bunch of nonsense at a 3-topic discussion or at a meeting that reads the daily reflections only. It's morally and philosophically comforting. And I can tell you there's meetings that are full of fucking potheads that are at those philosophically comforting meetings because they're not talking about the steps. We're not talking about this illness. So it's really important to know when you're sharing or when you look for your sponsor, what did you look for? Like there's a reason why, this place is full, right? Because it's probably a message that has depth and weight. People want a better life. They want the best life, right? And I don't pull punches on the talking about the illness. I'm disturbing people on the question of alcoholism everywhere I go. And I piss people off. But at the end of the day, like I heard somebody tell me today, you're speaking from the heart. I do, man. That's what I do. I don't fucking want nothing out of anyone here. I want you guys to be the best fathers, mothers, children, sons, whatever, right? I don't want nothing from anybody. I just want you to be the best. And that's the message, right? We talk about the illness, which is the defective character, which is what we will do more as we go. And then we talk about the solution to that, which is the relationship with God. That's what people want, man. They want a good life, right? So that's important. And it talks about it more in the next chapter that we're going to do. There's a solution. But in nearly all cases, it says nearly all. So not every single case, but nearly all. Their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their life. This isn't about getting your old life back because you don't want the old life back, because if you build a real relationship with your God, you will not want your old life back. But if you don't build a real relationship with God, you build a theoretical one, the old life's kind of good enough. But that's not what this literature is trying to produce for us. It's about a new life, recreating our life. In step 3, it says we were reborn. You're fucking reborn, man. You're different. Your roots have grasped new soil. You stand on a different footing. You're a different human being. And that is the God dope right there. A couple lines down, maybe 8 lines down. We feel after many years' experience that we have found nothing. Remember, this is the doctor, the medical fraternity. We have found nothing, 0, which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than what? The altruistic movement now growing up among them. This movement of all these fellowships, the 12-step fellowships, they are an altruistic movement. for these men and the families. The book was actually designed for the real alcoholic to follow directions. The suggestions are for the medical fraternity, for the family, and for the non-alcoholic, for the employer, to the wives. But for the real deal, when you read the original manuscript, which I'll just kind of allude to now, when we get to the step 3, we're going to be doing the original manuscript, not the big book, even though it's the same, but it's different. And why? Because it'll punch home really what we're actually trying to do with our creator. Okay, that's all.
Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems like the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, discontented until then they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as many so do, the phenomenon of the craving develops and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging resourceful with a firm resolution to not drink again. This is repeated over and over and until the person can experience the entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. On the other hand, strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once the psychic change has occurred, the very same person who had seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that he is required to follow a few simple rules.
Do you want to go first or you want me to go?
You go ahead. I'll just
Okay.
add.
So men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. That's why I drank. I love the effect produced by alcohol. This paragraph is probably one of the most important paragraphs in the whole book. So listen up. The sensation is so elusive. So when alcohol and drugs used to work for me, that sensation that I got when it worked for my solution to my life, it is now elusive. The sensation is so elusive that while we admit it is injurious, I know that it's bad for me. Okay? They cannot, after time, differentiate the true from the false. I have lost the power to tell you that this is bad for me. I know that it's bad. And I still want that effect of what it used to do when it worked for me. But that is now elusive. And I keep trying to grab it. It's like trying to catch a chicken. You try to catch a chicken, you're jumping all over the place. You're trying to hug them and you come up with a few feathers. And that's the kind of result that you get from the drink or the hoot after it doesn't work anymore. But you keep searching for that because there's a little part of your brain that says, I need relief. I need it now. What's always giving it to me? Ding, 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 click. I need relief now. And you reach for the pipe or you reach for the whatever it is, drink, and you take it. And the sensation of when it actually worked for substantial amounts of time, it's now elusive. But because you got to rewire the brain, because the old brain needs the same relief, okay? To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Your alcoholic life is the only normal one, even in recovery, okay? They're restless, irritable, discontent. Here is the spiritual malady. Here is the manifestations of self. This is it right here. Restless, irritable, discontented. Unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks. So maybe we're kind of living our lives and we're going along and we're in untreated alcoholism. We're angry, we're restless, we're discontent, we're agitated. People aren't listening to us. Fucking road rage is on. Fucking the dog's pissing on my shoes. The kids are running in front of the hockey game and I just can't take it, right? I'm in the malady. I'm in self. And then it says, unless we can experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks. So then think about this. If you've ever relapsed or in your old drinking career, I couldn't wait sometimes to get home and have that first hoot, right? The first hoot or the first drink. Then it was like, boom, everything's okay. Like right now, right in that moment, everything's okay. I'm present with my high. I'm present with that sip. I'm present. And I got a lot of ease and comfort out of that for a moment as I took that first one. And I got my ease and comfort from all of the bullshit that life's piling up on me in my own head. Comes at once by taking the first few drinks or hoots. Drinks they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again. The word succumb means fail to resist. After you succumb from living in the malady enough, you succumb to the desire. You fail to resist. You are powerless, stone cold sober of picking up that drink because you're living in the malady. And you succumb, you fail to resist, and you pick it up. Because you can't differentiate the true from the false. Because you are looking for the sense of ease and comfort that you need. The problem is that the sensation that you got over time, it doesn't work anymore. And then you put it in your body and it says, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops. Boom. I'm powerless over putting it in my body. And now I start the phenomenon of craving because it's in my body. And then I go through the well-known stages of the spree. My last spree was 6 years. 6 year spree. And we all know people who have had many years sprees. Some people are on sprees. The spree can last a day, a week, or months or years. And the spree will often result in overdose or accidents that kill you based on your being high or drunk. Emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to do it again. You finally come out of the spree, you're beaten, you're guilty, you're shameful, and you snap out of an a firm resolution not to do it again. I'm done. This is it. I'm fucking done. That's all of us. This is repeated over and over and over and over. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, a moral and emotional rearrangement, like we read earlier in the doctor's opinion, that they knew was necessary, but they couldn't do it because they don't have the powers of God that lie outside their synthetic knowledge. We need a psychic change. We need to rearrange this shit, okay? There is very little hope of his recovery. So a lot of people come into the program, they don't do fuck all. A lot of people can get here, God opens a window, here, change your life. I'll crawl through the window, I'm gonna do a few things, I start going to meetings. I start hearing how you guys gotta go through all these steps and do some drastic shit. Fuck, that's a little scary. I don't know if I wanna make amends. I don't know if I wanna look at myself. I feel pretty confident that I'm not gonna drink again. I call that the grace of God sobriety. Usually lasts anywhere from like a week. You might even get 8 months out of the grace of God sobriety. And why is it the grace of God? The grace of God means undeserved gift. You have a gift that you don't deserve because you haven't fucking done anything for it. That is the grace of God sobriety. Ron. I would say that's, yeah, maybe similar, resting on your laurels. But there's really no laurels to rest on. There's just, you're not even have done anything. So resting on your laurels in step 10 comes from like actually doing some of the work and then getting comfortable and self-satisfied.
Yeah, I think the word laurels means your past achievements. So like you did some stuff and then you let up and then you're trying to just use your past achievements to keep going, but you have to keep doing the work because it's a daily reprieve kind of thing. Can I add something?
Yep.
You done? Yeah, I was going to just, a story came to me. I remember having a conversation around if you could take a pill. It was asked to me, if you could take a pill that would allow you to just drink socially, would you? And then before I could answer, it was like, well, no, of course you wouldn't. You would want to take a pill that you would not have a consequence to the outcome of your getting wasted. And that was true for me, where it's like, why would I want to socially drink? I wouldn't want a pill to socially drink. I want to achieve that state of getting out of myself, to get out of the restless, irritable discontent. And that was something that it was conversation while I was talking about the step 1 and the spiritual malady and what that was like, trying to get out of it. We don't want to socially drink. We want to be completely out of ourselves so that we don't experience it. And then I was just also going to add that looking at others with impunity, like that they're just not having any consequences. And I I did that a lot too. I knew a couple of problem drinkers, and that actually slowed me down from getting help and confused me, because I was always looking to them like, well, how can they drink and they can black out and they can have these consequences? They can have a DUI, they can go to work and they can stop, they can stop for however much time that they, and it looked very similar. And I think like I was looking at a lot of problem drinkers who it looked alcoholically, but I'll never know. I just was always trying to do what they were doing because they could pull it together when they needed to go to work, or when they had their kids for the week, or whenever life needed them to be sober, they could do it. Where for me, it was a wild card and it was a lot of effort. And so in the rooms, I see that happening too, that it can look like you can have people coming in who they were high bottom. Maybe they're alcoholic, maybe they're not. We kind of talked about this last week, where you don't know the state a person comes in, if they really are alcoholic or not, if they have the spiritual malady that demands that we do this. And so if I'm listening to somebody who's talking about, a spiritual solution, doing like step 10 off the wall, say, and not doing the proper course of action, but yet they seem so happy. They're getting an outcome, and it looks like they're doing it a certain way. So again, it's like, just when you're comparing, don't. Just go back to what you know about yourself and back to what the book says, because comparison can really be misleading and confusing.
Okay. So maybe we won't get the doctor's opinion on Audrey. That's rude. Anyway, so let's keep going a little bit here.
Okay. On the other.
Hold on.
Oh,
So once the psychic change has occurred though, and what is the psychic change really? The psychic change is step 3 prayer. Build with me, do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away these difficulties. That's the beginning of where we start the introduction into the psychic change. And as I get into the 4th step and I start seeing the shit that I'm doing that's causing my failure, my mind and emotional manipulation, and how my thoughts actually fuck me, and the world's not really fucking me, I fuck me. And then I learn more about that in the 5. These are the things I need to discard. And then I become super willing in the 6, as willing as a dying man can be. The thing about the program is not many people talk about 6. They don't talk about the character change and the character building. We talk about just don't drink. Just don't drink. You'll be okay. If I don't take the first drink, I don't get drunk. How do you not take the first fucking drink? That doesn't happen without a psychic change. So with the psychic change, it says, the same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he ever despaired of solving them, suddenly, easily finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary of that being required to follow a few simple rules. Requirement is a must. We follow the rules. The rules are the spiritual disciplines, working out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic plane. We work the spiritual program of action, not a theory or a moral and philosophically comforting idea of what God might be. That's what this book can be. Oh, me and God. Oh, yeah, I'm turning my will and my life over every morning and every night. And I'm self-willing these principles into my affairs, because I said sorry to somebody today and this is working for me. Next week, what the fuck happened? He was just at the podium saying how tight him and God were last week, and he's drunk on fucking Friday. Because God's a fucking theory, man. If God's a theory, then God's actually an effective mental defense. But the book says that we won't have an effective mental defense against the first drink at a certain point. So the ego attaches to the idea of God, just like the ego can attach to the idea that, look what happens when my kids are away from me. I don't want that. Like, it's the same kind of thing. The ego attaches to anything it wants. So we have to work this program through the practical application of what these steps and directions are actually teaching us.
so he was telling me this stuff the first time that we went for coffee. It's a lot. Like, it's a lot, and it didn't make any sense. And it's like, he's like, well, how do you, and he's talking about step 10 and he's like, well, what is step 10? What is step? And I literally just met him. Like, and he's like, what is step 10? What is, and so I told him the step 10. He's like, stop doing the fucking step off the wall. I'm like, okay, stop yelling at me. I'm like, just tell me what step 10 is. You remember that?
I didn't yell at you.
Yes, you did. It was intense. So anyways, what I can say to just like simplify what he just said is like the micro moments that he taught me. It's like, just do the micro moments, which looks a lot like nothing. It looks like I'm really actually doing nothing sometimes, where I felt like I had to be like having some sort of something happening, but a lot of things that were happening, I look back and they were happening, you know, like even just attending a meeting or choosing not to reach out and like one of the things that was on my sex ideals for step 5 was don't text men when you're bored or lonely. So a lot of times that looked like nothing. That looked like, okay, what am I going to do instead? And then I had a list of what I was going to do instead. So I'd pick like call a friend, call a sponsee, hang out with my kids, whatever. So in that way, it looked like nothing. They were these small little micro decisions, but they weren't micro at all. And so the practical application, like I would get frustrated being like, well, I don't know if I'm a theory or if it's a practical, like, I don't know. And now looking back, it's like, it shifted slowly with the micro moments. And there was more times that I was not in the zone than when I was in the zone. And then that shifted. And then now it's like, I can see that I really do have a reliance on a higher power that's mine and not borrowed from somebody else or whatever. So if you're wondering how this all works out in a day-to-day, it's in the small moments and in the small decisions. And those are the big things that add up to a serene recovery and an ability to be effective. And like all those things take all the micro moments. And the big moments are actually, I would say, maybe not as important as all the little things that are happening in between.
Okay. Thank you, Janine. That was awesome. So there's not much real deadly material left in the doctor's opinion anyway. We're going to stop there. We will read the rest of the doctor's opinion next week, but we're not going to go much into it. All the good shit we've already covered. There's a couple little things that we'll touch base on, and that'll be it. But we're going to end with a prayer.
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at BILLWARDLIFE to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.